for some reason people still focus on the fact that video games are still a young, developing sort of medium, and that's really the reason why they're not art yet, because they haven't matured enough. Yes, Jeffrey?
Do they at least concede that there's a sizable portion of games that could be considered art? I mean, maybe not all of them.
It's one of those arguments where, kind of like how the Christians of like medieval days to now have, and I hope nobody's offended by this, but there have been sort of those developments where, you know, we found out that the sun wasn't at the Earth wasn't at the center of the solar system, and people said, okay, fine, I'll concede that to you, but this argument here, and it's sort of that receding pool of, yeah, okay, this game may be art, but you still have to explain this game and that sort of thing. That's kind of what's happening in terms of these games being defined as art. So, why is it even a debate? Why do we have a debate when we have beautiful games like Shadow of the Colossus? Or like Journey? These games are gorgeous. These games are art in motion. Very simply put, because it just feels artsy isn't a good enough reason or claim. Sure, you can make a lot of analyzed comments about Shadow of the Colossus' atmosphere, the music, sort of how it engrosses a player in feeling this sort of desolate wasteland with giant beasts sort of just sprinkled throughout it. And Journey is, of course, desert land that you can traverse and feel either with companionship with a friend or alone. You can make a lot of arguments to the artistic aspects of these, but there's always going to be other games that'll kind of balance this out in terms of how the average person who doesn't play games sees them. So you have, let's see, for your Shadow of the Colossus or for your Journey, you have Gears of War. For your other games, such as maybe Sound Shapes or Braid, you have Call of Duty. These games, a lot of people see them as not artistic or of artistic worth because when you think about it, it's a military shooter, it's a sci-fi shooter, and they really focus more on, at least people believe, the blood and the guts and the gore, and that sort of appeal to humans' basic instinctual desire to see violence and this sort of chaos happening. And even in that analysis, it's just kind of been proven that these are artistic works. These are just different expressions. There were paintings of, Greeks being slaughtered. That's still considered art. These are just kind of moving paintings of things being slaughtered, and that's art. I mean, come on. That's just something that people haven't accepted yet, though, because it just is so new, and it's so violent, and people are sort of overcome with how these images move while paintings in a museum don't. It's really the defining thing is the combination of all the forms of the mediums that make this new art form. So, what's a way that we can resolve this debate for good? There's only one way, and that's actually a lie. There's probably many ways, but I'm going to say there's only one way. And that's to define a standard method of analysis. So when you define a standard method of analysis, a standard for how to observe games in terms of the components they're composed of, you define a structure that not only you can use to analyze these games and understand them better, but that other people can use to analyze these games and understand them better. So even though we're all fairly experienced gamers, I'm sure, the average person on the street would pick up a controller and think that you had to be a Navy fighter pilot to play a game. Well, that's part of the way that games have deterred people from seeing them as art, is because, well, it's too complex and not everybody can experience it in their own way, and that sort of deters some people and even scares them into saying that they can't be art because I can't experience them as art. If we make this system of analysis, we have it so that people can experience it whether they be playing it or watching it. You can break it down and you can understand the components of it and you can sort of glimpse into how beautiful the game is without necessarily having to pick up a controller and play it for yourself. Maybe have somebody play it for you. So, before we begin, why should we begin? Why should we have this standard of analysis, this sort of thing? Does anybody have any sort of idea as to why we would need a standard of analysis aside from what I just said, which is that it would solidify people understanding how you break a game down? It's kind of a confusing question. Go ahead, Andrew.
Give people to respect reading?
Yes, get people to respect the medium. Showing that you have a system of analysis shows that it can be drawn parallel to other mediums. So film has its own system of analysis. You can break films down into certain components. You can break portraits down, sculptures down, any other forms of art you can break down into components. Games are the exact same. Making sure that that parallel is there assures us that we can also compare it and contrast it to other works and other forms of art. And in that sense, we can expose that element to people. So what can we gain from analysis? Well, there it is, right there. This is the exact same thing, pretty much. That from analysis, we can gain people sort of respecting the medium as a whole, but also we can respect the medium as a whole. We can gain everything in a very dramatic sense. When you're able to analyze a game, be it good or bad, by subjective definition, you can learn from it in every way possible. If you play a game like Duke Nukem Forever, and you think that it's completely awful, but you keep pushing through it, you're going to be able to break certain parts of it down as you go. Even the worst parts will be helpful to you. Because as a game designer, you need to know exactly what to do and what not to do when it comes to building a game. Being able to analyze and break these components down can help you define your own design. And that's a big thing, of course. When you want to convey an idea to people, you want to know how you can convey that idea and how you can convey it properly. If you play games like, let's see, like Bioshock Infinite, for example. No spoilers. The very beginning of the game, this isn't really a spoiler part, for the tutorial session, they walk you through a county fair where you participate in little games, and they teach you sort of how to shoot guns and whatever else. And this is a very subtle approach to teaching the player mechanics of the game. This is a note of game design. This is something that you can observe. Because there are other games like Call of Duty which just drop you in the middle of the action and they say, move the left thumbstick to move the right thumbstick to look around. Here's all of this text on screen. And that's good and fine. That'll teach a person to use the controls if that person's dedicated to reading on screen. But if you really want to feel more engaged in the action and more in the game, you might consider doing a more subtle approach like Bioshock does, or like Mega Man does. Mega Man does a really good example of gameplay sort of through learning and not necessarily through telling. These are just examples of things you can plug from breaking down.